Welcome to Unraveled, where we unpack the sermon one thread at a time.
All right, I want to begin today talking to you about reflecting on Paul and Timothy's relationship. Paul was a spiritual mentor for Timothy, and so I want you guys to think about maybe a spiritual mentor you had in your life. Maybe it's a relative, maybe it's a former pastor, maybe it's a seminary professor. For each of you, and whoever wants to jump in first, what would be a spiritual mentor you guys could tell us about?
There's been probably a number of them throughout my different periods of my life. Two of my brothers have really been. They were both pastors, and they have always kind of been that sounding board and things like that, and they still are. But the last maybe probably since I became a senior pastor, the guy that came and preached my ordination service, Art Simpson, he's a pastor over there in Granger, Indiana. He was our home pastor back in Pennsylvania before I went to seminary, and he was kind of instrumental in pointing me towards schooling. And like almost every Sunday morning, he sends me a text at like 6 a.m. I'm praying for your sermon today. And he's just been a great encouragement and sounding board. And if I ever have questions about how to handle things, he's been through a lot, and so he's been very intentional, I guess, is what I would say.
That's good.
But
for you, Dayton?
Yeah. I was pretty lucky when I was younger to have several people within the church I grew up in that were, that would be instrumental in youth group and just pouring time into us as kids. But I'd probably say my dad. If I had to pick someone, I'd say definitely my dad. He just very faithful his whole life, whether it was church attendance or serving or being in the Word. He just set a really good example, for me, and he's always someone I can go to get a biblical perspective on things. So I just really appreciate, I'd say, that mentorship.
It's good to obviously have a mentor, somebody you can lean on, somebody you can ask questions to, and also sometimes that mentor relationship can turn into almost like they're seeing something in you maybe you don't see in yourself. And so I want you guys to think about maybe a time where you were able to spot something in somebody that maybe they didn't see in themselves, or maybe it's the opposite, where somebody saw something in you. And so, again, Paul saw so much in Timothy in the beginning where Timothy's like, I'm not capable of doing this. How do you see this in me? And so how do we recognize that if we are maybe receiving that, or how do we look for that in others? What would you guys, Dayton, why don't you start us up?
Well, I kind of immediately think of just like work too. In the business world, we got as a business owner, I work with a lot of different employees. So many are younger than me too. So kind of thinking of Paul and Timothy, I think you got to just be looking for it. First of all, obviously, you have to be someone that is trying to be that mentor. I benefited from others that were older than me in business, and like I was talking about earlier with just in youth group. But you got to be on the lookout for that. You have to. I think with experience and time, I'm not, I don't have tons of years behind me, but I've been around a little while, and you start to see, in the business world, I always think and tell people it's seeing things beyond yourself. And I think that applies to the spiritual sense too. Like, are you just focused on, me or the big I and not others? And when I think of our business and I see people that are doing well or have the potential, they're looking out for, how can I benefit the whole organization or others or my peers? And to me, that's one of the things, and that just feeds right into, our spiritual walk and discipleship and its relationships with others and thinking of others, in addition to yourself.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
What would you add to that?
Yeah, I remember when I first came to the church, probably the people I got to know the quickest or whatever was Evan Bechtold, and he wasn't married at that time yet to Rachel, but they were, I remember my first weekend here, they took me to Dave's for lunch, and kind of gave me showed me around town or whatever. But I remember early on, I would often say to Evan, I can just see you in ministry someday. And, he was, he had in some ways a similar path to mine. He sold cars for a little bit, and he was in, doing retail stuff. And I could just always see just like I think a servant heart. Like, he didn't matter what we would want to do for young adults. He was in and fully invested, and he was just all about kind of the kingdom of God type of stuff, even when he wasn't even thinking about going back to school. And so it was neat to kind of, we almost hired him here. We actually offered him a job, and it wasn't right, and he ended up going on the mission field instead. So it's been neat to see, God kind of work through him. But it was just so obvious to me, and not only him, but Rachel. Like Rachel, because when you're a husband and wife team, like, I knew some guys from seminary. They were all in, and their wives were like, kind of. It was not like they were against it, but it was like they knew it was a different lifestyle. They knew the money wouldn't be there, type of thing. And but Rachel always was as much behind things as Evan. So I think it's neat when you see, and I see some younger people now, even in our church, that are. One guy's been talking to me about going to seminary, and I've been kind of pushing. Maybe I'm hoping he pursues it, because I think when God puts that type of thing on your heart, it's not just because your mind's empty. Like he's. So I don't know. When I see people hungry after God and have some gifts, I get excited about that.
Not to boast on Evan, but he invited us to church here.
Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, and we weren't like BFFs at the time or anything,
right.
but to your point, he was out there building relationships, even if he wasn't super close with someone. And I'm sure he's doing that over in Ireland right now.
Yep, for sure.
No, it's good to have that mentor, and it's good to, I don't know, I feel like people like Evan, recognizing that potential, and maybe before they see it in themselves. And to tie into more of what your sermon was yesterday, was talking about being in the world but not of it, and fleeing the things that maybe can be pulling us away from the things of God, right? The things that maybe the mentor sees in us.
Yeah.
Specific examples you mentioned: materialism, gossip, addiction, unhealthy relationships. Do you think there's one category, maybe out of those four that I mentioned, or something that you feel like draws most Christians? Like maybe it's a bigger pull, whether it's materialism, gossip, addiction, unhealthy relationships. So what would you say is the biggest pull for Christians today?
Yeah, I don't know that I would. I think there's just so many of them. Like I just, even for guys and gals, I think there's sometimes differences. I mentioned like sports betting, and I'm not saying women don't bet on sports, because I know but just with guys, it's like a thing to do, a thing to talk about, or whatever. But I think there's, kind of the lust of flesh, pride of life, that those are things that we face before we come to Christ, and we face after we come to Christ. And like one of the points I tried to make in the sermon is Satan's not everywhere, but his followers, his demons, his those that are active in the world, they are personal on you. So they've seen. They're not, they don't know everything like God. They're not all knowing. They're not all present, but they've watched, So I don't know how it works, but it seems like they know how to target you. They know how to target me. They know how to target you. Like they are personal. They know what works for you might not work for me. We've talked before. We have kind of addictive personalities. Like I'm always thankful to God that like alcohol was never a big thing with me, because if it was, it would have been like a real big thing for me. But I always never liked the taste of it, and I'm thankful to God for that, because if I would have liked the taste of it, I think I would have been all in the deep end of the pool. But so I just think there's just a lot of, some people it's shopping, some people it's clothes, it just there's so many little pools, and like there's nothing wrong with shopping, there's nothing wrong with clothes, there's nothing wrong with sports, but when we go that extra, I don't know, we take it to that extra level, that extra thing, and like they entice you. The first bet is $5, and if you win, you get $200. Yeah. Well, I guarantee 99% of those people have lost that $200 back and then some. It's they just want you to get your foot in the door, and then they know once they have you. Yeah. And that's not just sports betting; that's everything. Like that's how Satan works.
He's definitely looking for the areas that maybe we have an interest in. Or, I don't know. Maybe as a business owner, as a parent, or your own perspective, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head on everyone's different, because that's what I thought. When you talked about sports betting, it's like, well, I have no interest in that.
Yeah.
personally,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean that I don't have the things that tempt me, or, that cause me to stumble. So, I think it's probably just knowing yourself, and there is no one thing. I would say of the ones you did call out, I think materialism is a broad category that like impacts lots of things, because it does.
Yeah.
You could almost tie sports betting into materialism, the love of money and having wealth and all that.
Yeah.
So like, not that is like the answer to the question, but I do think that's one that probably a lot of people struggle with in different contexts, especially in our world. Like we have such poor perspective on how good we have it and what life is like, not only historically, how good we have it now, but even across nations, just as Americans. Like, I just think we are so numb to the things we have, the comforts of life that we've been so blessed with, that we don't realize our materialistic ways.
And it's incredible, even like as I think of sports betting, like that's one that could be a temptation to me, because like in my own mind, like I think I know a little bit about sports, and even though I probably don't, but I followed it my whole life. But I think about like how different like that is than even 20 years ago, than even 30 years ago. Like that's something that might really be a thing for like my son, for instance, like just because he's in a different, he's growing up in a world in which sports betting is always going to be accessible. Like for us, it's like new, like, wait a minute, I'm not going to bet, lose money. But just how culture shifts it. Like you didn't even have the opportunity to do that, unless you knew a bookie, back. I remember when I was selling cars, one of the guys knew a bookie if you wanted to place a few bets, but it was like a kind of a
back alley thing.
Right.
Yeah.
But now it's like you can get on your phone and there's advertisements for it, and you can click right here and away you go. So I just think Satan is constantly up in his game, with those type of, even with technology to draw us into these things.
We just heard testimony yesterday of this exact thing, potentially wrecking.
Absolutely.
And the enemy's goal is to steal, kill, and destroy. Families, you as an individual.
Yeah.
Do we feel like in our culture today, as Christians, there's more acceptable things that we can be addicted to, or acceptable? I mean, you're talking about hard work. I want to get to the top. That's acceptable in our American culture. But like, for example, so are there certain temptations that feel more acceptable than others? I mean, sports betting is like faux pas a little bit, but it's not like it's outwardly like. I've had some sports betting in my past, and what's crazy is the thing that stopped me was the new change in Illinois, where they charge you $1 per bet, no matter what.
Yeah.
For that $1, it's like, well, I ain't worth it anymore.
Like, that was enough. The syntax was enough.
The point of it was just like, but again, the enemy tries to pull at whatever. Like, it's not sports gambling, it's something else. And just kind of keep that guard up. So do you think there's certain temptations that are maybe, again, more acceptable or easier to justify in the Christian culture? What would you say?
Yeah, I'd say definitely. And things are changing too. Not to keep on the sports betting thing, but now sports betting is changing. And again, not something I get into, but I pay attention to it. And like now, it's not just who wins the game. There's a million different sub bets, and now they have this poly market, which is betting on politics or betting on and that's something so I'm a little interested in politics. So that's how I've learned about this even more, because I heard someone talking about this, and they're talking about, DraftKings, all that's going to be gone. It'll be poly market doing everything. And you could literally bet on everything, no matter what it is. And I think that, to your point, your question is, who knows what 5, 10, or 20 years from now, this betting on everything, but it's just normal. Like just the culture's numb to it, just like hard work. Like that was a good example I never would have thought of, but that's almost praised. And again, there's always like not everything has a good and a bad, but like hard work, obviously, we three all love hard work, but you take it too far. I don't know. I think there's a lot of things that the culture just makes us numb to.
Yeah, I agree. I think, whether it's, I don't know, drinking, again, I talked about that, as some people are, won't drink at all, and that's better for some people, and some people like to, have a drink or two, and but I think that's something that becomes, or has become, maybe more mainstream, accepted. Like the church I grew up in, boy, if somebody was over your house and like they opened the fridge and there was a beer there, boy, you'd be on the no-go list, it's no-go for flight or whatever. And now it's I don't think there's the same stigma. There is maybe with the older generation of people to a certain extent, but even like things like marijuana, like I know a lot of Christians that have dabbled in that and they don't see much harm in it from time to time, and and well, they use it for medicinal reasons, and we justify things like that. And I don't know, it's a lot of self-medicating stuff, whether it be, things like we're talking about addiction-based stuff, or even just, even buying things can be self-medicating. We think that fills that hole in our heart and our soul and whatever else is lacking. But, I think there's a lot of things that have become, I don't know, maybe more gradually accepted for sure.
Yeah. What are some pointers we can give to kind of put some guardrails in place? Because the dabbler, like you mentioned, that word is like the lie. Just do it one time. Just
Right.
bet $5. Just have one
Yeah.
drink. Just have one puff. Just have sex just one time. It'll say
Yeah.
whatever. Fill in the blank. Just
Sure.
one time. And so, how do we put barriers up? What role does community or your accountability partners? How do we help people? How do we guide people to kind of steer away and then flee? Bringing in the words you mentioned, like fleeing
Yeah.
is huge. And so, what are we like? Maybe I just smoked weed for the first time yesterday. How do we guardrails do I put in place to help protect that?
I think so. Understanding sin to me is like step one. So like knowing what's right and wrong, and sin separates us from God. So like understanding what sin is, and then what are the sins that you're most susceptible to. I mean, we all sin, but we all have different. We're all wired differently, and it makes me think of we did a Bible study. Andy Stanley had a Guardrails Bible study. We did it years ago. And it was a really good analogy, and I don't know if this was his idea. I'm certain it's not, but so think of the ditch is your sin, and so what's the point of a guardrail? Well, the guardrail isn't in the ditch. The guardrail is at the side of the road to prevent you from going in the ditch, and I'm like, oh wow, that's a really good analogy. Yeah. So then you got to but you have to know what your ditch is, and then you have to, before you're in the moment. So let's say you're it's something with your girlfriend and you're going too far, too close. And so you have to figure out what is the guardrail, and the guardrail is not when you're too far.
Yeah.
It's when you're getting too close. So if it's with a girl or marijuana or drinking or porn or what, fill in your struggle and know, what's that moment where I'm going to feel too close and then I'm going to go in the ditch. And all that takes is thinking ahead too. So like you got to know and plan ahead, and that's, you got to be reflective. You have to understand, okay, what is the sin and where do I need to draw the line? You talk about the one or two drinks, and for someone that's fine, but for someone else it's not. Yeah. And I think that was always a helpful analogy to me. Now, am I perfect at knowing all my guardrails? No, but I feel like I can understand what my sins are. And I know when I've gone too far, so you got to stop. So that was a helpful metaphor for me.
Another quote I heard was, "For every mile of road, there's 2 miles of ditch."
Yeah. Well, Joby. Yeah.
What would you say? How do we surround ourselves with community? I mean, what would you recommend for that?
I don't know. One thing I've been trying to do personally, even in sermons, is like naming stuff. Like I'd say when I was growing up, like the pastor wouldn't even say the word sex, like and not that I'm cutting edge by like saying things like that, but I think even talking about some of the like I brought up the Meatloaf, Paradise by the Dashboard Lights song, and
which I never heard of, and I had to go listen to it, so now I'm corrupted.
Yeah.
I got some grief. I didn't raise my hand. I'm like, I honestly don't know the song, but I don't know what it was.
But it was, it was funny. After the first service, like, it must have been 30 people came up and talked about that song and how it hit home. Kevin Cooley talked about how him and Tina, they listened to it one time on the way to church, and they explained to the girls, and they had this discussion about this song specifically and all those types of things. But it's, it's just like, even like the old Michael Jackson song, you know, some of his songs seem sweet and innocent, and the Billie Jean song, you know, but it's like, but Jair's not my son, you know. It's like the whole type of those type. But I think naming stuff and like being, I don't know. I've tried to be, even sometimes when I do counseling with people, like I'll try to say stuff like, hey, is there another woman? Is there another guy? Is there, you know, are you dabbling in porn? You know, like, I think sometimes it's just, you know, when we, like me as a pastor, if I'm making a generalized application, it hits nobody. Like when I was talking about false teachers, we think, oh, false teachers, that must be the guy in the robe up there as the pastor saying false words. It's like, no, it's people with wrong mindsets in the congregation even that are steering people astray. And like we need to kind of name things. We need to not be afraid to bring topics up. And I just think like trying to keep that for, you know, hush for just back alleys when you talk about stuff isn't, I think in our world it's more, because everything we see on, no matter what you have on the screen or whatever, they're not afraid to bring up anything. So we need to be willing and able to talk about things like that, even from the pulpit. So
Communicating with somebody, whether you're in a mentor relationship, like a counseling relationship, or just friend to friend, like it makes it more relatable and almost like less isolation for the person that you're talking to.
Yeah.
If you mention the sin specifically, and maybe even if you had a past of it, but even if not, like if you just make these generalized statements, and it's like, well, I can't relate to that, or my pastor is so holy that I can't even sit in the room with him because of, you know. And I think there's value in that, to recognize that, like, you're a sinner, I'm a sinner, so are you. And so like if we're mentoring somebody, maybe we never struggled with it, but also maybe we did, and here's the freedom that can come with that. Yeah. And so I think that's, I don't know, just as a accountability partner or somebody who's guiding somebody else, I feel like that is huge. Like you said, name it, because it's the enemy's naming it, and they know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, for sure.
I just want to finish with this thought and kind of shifting gears a little bit with the older generation, and we talked a little bit about this few months ago or whatever, but talking about the older generation mentoring the younger generation and bringing connection. And I know there's life that happens. You talk about a mentor relationship. A lot of times the mentors, you need to find a mentor who's in the next season of life, right? Don't find a mentor who's younger than you. We're doing the same things as you. Like, we're all getting drunk together. We're all networking connect. No. Find somebody who's in the next stage of life that maybe can help guide you. So how do we as a church, I don't know, better coach this, better encourage this? And, you know, and if maybe I'm a listener, I'm 65 years old. What encouragement would be good to hear, to say, find somebody who, you know, is needing your help, because there is that season below you that could use some guidance. So what do you guys say to that?
I remember going back to when I was high school or whatever. There was a few older gentlemen in our church really that they would come talk to me and ask questions, like just not deep spiritual things, but building a relationship with me. And as a kid. Funny, again, perspective. I love that word. Over time, you don't, like when I was that age, I was extremely intimidated to go talk to an adult.
Yeah.
You know, and I was a pretty confident kid, you know, but and there's no amount of confidence that would get me to go approach an adult. So when those adults, men in this situation, talk to me and build a relationship with me, that was like a great first start into developing that relationship. And they took the initiative. And I think now that I'm that age, you know, are getting into that group, I think that it's on me and people, and it doesn't matter where you are. You can do this even when you're in your 20s or 30s, but I think it's important for the older people to reach out to the younger people first. Yeah. I think that's helpful because we have the knowledge. We know, I think you mentioned this either in a sermon or, you know, we know the pitfalls. We've been through it. We've had the life experiences that are beneficial, not that we can't learn from younger people. And I think it's tough. You know, I still have high school kids, and like, it's hard even for me as an adult to identify with younger generation at times, and I'm half plugged in. I can't imagine when my kids are out of the house, and it seems like there's a disconnect there. But I still know I still was a kid once. I can still ask them about school. I can ask them. Yeah. I may not know all the latest stinking things that are happening on social media, and I may be lame, but I think taking that step to build relationships with younger people and be the one that initiates it so that they're comfortable talking to you. And I've seen it. as I've had relationships with kids that are my kids' age, they start to open up more.
Yeah.
You start talking about more important things. And then you hope at one time, if they maybe have something that's really weighing on them, they're okay coming to you.
Yeah.
And I think those are just some of but you got to do that a lot. You just got to keep building those relationships.
Yeah, no, I would echo exactly what you said. I think it's the emphasis is on the older person to cultivate that relationship. We've had people over the years come and like, I'd like to mentor somebody, find somebody for me type of deal. And that's just not how it's going to work. Like, cause, it needs to be somebody that you take an interest in, and, and there's a lot of ways you can do that. Just paying attention, like, especially a church our size, like some of these older farmers can see somebody in, FFA and a younger person and even just talk about that and build a little relationship, and then, try to take it a little bit further. And I just think intentionality, I think is probably the key word, because it's not just about, having a buddy to hang around with or that, like, that's not the purpose. And it also doesn't mean that you're going to sit down and, okay, I'm going to teach Dayton, about Exodus today. Like, that's not what it's about either. But it's a cross between those. It's talking about life. It's talking about things that maybe have, hey, how's things going? You got 3 kids that are, under the age of 15, and they're in those ages, they don't listen to their parents. And how's that going with you? And then that'll just open things up or whatever. But I just think it's we have to be intentional with it. And as far as how we can try to help it with it as a church, we encourage things like men's groups and women's groups, and some of that can start there, but it takes somebody paying attention, I think, more than anything, and wanting to do it and seeing the value in it, because there's value, like you said, there's value not only for the mentee, but also the mentor, because, you're around somebody and it's giving you purpose and you're learning from them too. And, I got this app on my phone. I don't know what to do with it. You can, and then it's like my son will just be, I got taken care of. You're good. You can have that type of, not that you're going to learn technology because of it, but it's developing a relationship you might have the rest of your life. And, and maybe it's just with one person, maybe you have developed that with a few people. I just think there's something, I think there's untapped opportunity and potential there that can be beneficial to the whole family of Christ, whether it's women doing it together or men. And I just, the obvious is, we don't do this cross sexually, even if it's, a 65-year-old man isn't going to mentor a 38-year-old woman. Like, I would not recommend that for any reason, that just goes without saying. But I just think there's something that could be really powerful and helpful and meaningful in a lot of different ways.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Unraveled.